All right, so welcome back. Today we will be reviewing the very hated Nostalgia Critics The Wall. Of my understanding, this album is basically just clowning on Pink Floyd's Wall, which is one of my favorite albums. And I'm writing the intro before I listen to the song, so that's why I said of my understanding, but I'll probably know later on in the video. But apparently a lot of people hate it because of that reason. But I'll give it a fair chance and listen to the full album from start to finish. So let's go. The album was released in 2019 and has a total of 15 tracks. Starting off the album, we have In the Floyd, which is an obvious parody of In the Flesh. In the Floyd is actually pretty horrible because it's just saying that the original album is bad, even though it's not. Not only in that is not only that, but the music itself is very terribly redone in this song as well. I'll give it a 1 out of 10. Next up, track 2 is When the Wall Broke Free. This song is basically talking about how horrible the movie was and how quickly it was to be in the discount bin. This again lacks comedy. I don't understand the joke. And it's just rather annoying, and the movie isn't even all that bad anyway. This is definitely worse than In the Floyd, and it's really possibly one of the worst songs I've ever heard. Therefore, it will be reviewed as a 0 out of 10. Next up, we have track 3, which is 14 seconds long, called Corey. It's another awful one, but thankfully it only lasts a few seconds. It's just him saying a thing, screaming a thing, really, but I'll give it a 1.5 out of 10 because it's very unnecessary and I don't want to listen to it. Next up, track 4 is the song after this one is really good. This obnoxious parody of Another Brick in the Wall Part 1. At first I thought he was just going to say, okay, the next one's good, but no, he then starts messing with Another Brick in the Wall. He says stuff like it's repetitive and whatnot. I guess this is one of the least worst ones, but by no means is it good at all. I'll say 1.25 out of 10. Next up, we have track 5, and it's another parody of one of the Brick in the Wall songs. This time it's called We Need More Victimization. It's basically criticizing how in the actual song it's saying we don't need no education. How strict do you have to be mad at the lyrics of that song? Like, that's an actual question. I seriously don't get it at all. I mean, I guess the fans, if there are fans of this album, can come at me and say, oh, well, you're making fun of the lyrics. I guess. But still, I'm just not a big fan of this one, and I'll give it a 0.75 out of 10. Next up, we have So Long, Weird Song, which continues to criticize the genius minds that created the original album. It really is sad how one person can be so critical over one of the best albums ever released. I don't know. I guess there will always be music that people... Or I guess there will always be people that dislike your music, because I'm sure people who listen to Harry Styles with my reviews that I made are kind of like that and whatnot. But yeah. I'll give So Long Weird Song a 0.5 out of 10. Next up, track 7 is called The Forgotten Song. It's a parody of Hey You, and it's making fun of the fact that it's not in the movie soundtrack or something like that. I guess this is one of the more tame songs off the album, but it's still pretty bad. I mean, yeah, I'll give it a 2 out of 10. Next up, track 8, we have Is There Anybody Who Cares? This is obviously a parody of Is There Anybody Out There? And I'm sure he's asking if there's anybody who cares about the movie and album, and I'll answer that for you. Hell yes. one of, if not the greatest Pink Floyd album ever, and I would say one of the best albums in the history of music itself. Anyways, it's another unbearable track to listen to. At least this one has less of whining and more of just horrible replication of music. I'll say 0.5 out of 10. Alrighty, next up, track 9 is Comfortably Dumb. It's an obviously parody of Comfortably Numb, and this is really bad. He's poking fun at the fact in the movie the guy was out of it due to drugs. That's seriously it. It's a horrible way to criticize one of the best songs ever written because, well, there is no way to criticize Comfortably Numb. And it has like the best guitar solo ever in it. So, I mean, I don't even know what to say. I'll give it a 0 out of 10. Next up, we have In the Floyd again. This one is still horribly criticizing the movie, and it really feels like I'm listening to the same stuff over and over. Pretty horrendous overall. Terrible music replication, horrible singing, and worse critics. 0.25 out of 10. Next up, track 11 is Waiting for the Point. And like many other on this album, it's horribly musically and horrible lyrically. He is trying to think of any point he can to try and bury the wall, but all he's doing is burying himself. I'll give it a 0.5 out of 10, I guess. Next up, we have track 12, which is another very unbearable song, Bring the Runtime Down. This is just so annoying and unneeded. It's a horrible representation of Bring the Boys Back Home and criticizing nothing that's important, and it's not even an issue either. He's really trying to make himself look like a clown. It'll get another 0 out of 10. Next up, we have track 13 called The Deeper Meaning, which tries so hard to be funny, but shockingly, it wasn't. I'm actually so bored listening to this album. This has been one of the worst experiences. No, not has been one. This is the worst experience while making a video I've ever had. Anyways, this track will get a 0.25 out of 10. Next up, the second to last track, thank God, we have Fennah's The Trial. It's just another attempt to being funny while criticizing something that doesn't need to be criticized, like every other song. And like I mean, I know I'm saying basically the same thing for each song, but it's true. And I know me just rattling on is about as boring on this album as it is about as boring as this album, and you know what? And you know that if you've listened to this album. If you haven't listened to it though, consider yourself lucky and just keep it that way. Anyways, I got sidetracked. This will get a 0.5 out of 10. And finally, Lord, we made it to the end. It's called Spongebob Theme. It's literally just a cover of the Spongebob theme. Very unnecessary, and I still hate it. I don't know why. It's probably because the rest of this is so bad, and I just want to hate them at this point, so I'll give it a 2.25 out of 10. But yeah, thankfully, that's it. We have completed our torture of listening to all 15 tracks from Nostalgia Critic The Wall, and the only thing to do is get our final score, which we do by calculating the average. Alrighty, the average is calculated, and the final score of Nostalgia Critic The Wall is a whopping 0.75 out of 10, and it definitely deserves this horrible score, and that puts it at the bottom of every single album that I've ever reviewed on this channel, even lower than Fine Line. But then again, Fine Line only got like 4 some stars, so yeah, this is a long shot. Easily the worst album that I've ever listened to, touched, viewed, listened, whatever you want to call it. So yeah. 0.75, that is really bad, and it's deserving. Anyways, that's it. I would love to hear your thoughts on this album and album suggestions in the comments. Thank you all for watching. See you later.